just talked about protein, and this is an interesting one again, and I think a nice little layup for you. It says, I'm trying to get my daily protein intake up, and that's because historically I've been incredibly low, which is pretty common across people just in broader life. So this isn't even really an athlete that's asking this. I have a hard time getting all the calories in. This is a female person, by the way. So I have a hard time getting all the calories in, all the protein. It's just hard logistically, hard to eat it all. Is it a bad idea, or is there any negative impact from consuming protein powder? If so, what's best?
Short answer is no. You can absolutely use a protein supplement to complement your diet, and especially if you are struggling to get in, total amounts of protein, then using a protein supplement is absolutely fine. Whether you use a whey protein supplement or a blended plant protein supplement, there's no issues with that. I guess what I would focus on is food first, then using that supplement or that complement, as we like to call it, to just top up. It shouldn't be, okay, breakfast, whey protein, lunch, whey protein or protein powder, dinner, protein powder. It becomes very stale. You're going to miss out on a lot of micronutrition while still hitting, the macros and obviously getting in your protein. You're obviously not getting in the rest of your macronutrients with that supplement as well, because a protein supplement is just purely a protein supplement. Of course, there are blends out there as well, but what we would generally recommend at Fuelin is that you use a high quality whey protein isolate, or as I mentioned, a blended plant protein. You use a blended plant protein just to make sure that you get the full amino acid spectrum that you would get from a whey protein isolate. So that's generally how we go about it. I think one thing that I do like to encourage, though, is if an athlete is struggling to hit their protein intake, you can fortify some foods with your protein supplement, which sort of, yes, you're still using a protein supplement, but you're also mixing it with whole foods. So I'll give you some examples, and it's usually at breakfast where people struggle. So you could get a Greek yogurt, you could mix in half a scoop of whey protein isolate or plant protein, mix that in, suddenly you've got an extra 15 or up to 20 grams extra protein from that scoop. Same if you've got a cereal, say you're eating Weetabix or even Cheerios or whatever you're choosing to eat, Rice Krispies, mix the milk with the protein supplement, pour that over your cereal, suddenly that protein is being ingested with the rest of your meal. And so you're fortifying that, that breakfast meal. And that's a really nice way of bumping up protein intake. Yes, you are using a protein supplement, but you're also consuming it with whole foods. And especially for heavier athletes, they find doing that sort of fortification using a quality protein supplement can be very beneficial in terms of hitting their total protein intakes. And I would use I would use that tactic rather than buying a high protein breakfast cereal, because high protein breakfast cereals don't actually have much protein in them. There's usually a very low threshold for something to be considered high protein. So you're much better off fortifying it with a really good quality protein supplement.
Super helpful. One more question, just on the side, that I thought of is there any negative? You get the protein powders and you have the unflavored, then there's often chocolate, vanilla. Is there any harm of having the chocolate or vanilla, the flavored ones?
Short answer, no. I think what I would check, though, is what are in the ingredients of the protein supplements you're taking. So I tend to recommend a company called True Protein, which is an Australian company, because they use natural products, minimally processed. And that's the reason I like it. It also tastes great, but they will use things like stevia instead of, say, an artificial sweetener. Now, yes, you could argue, people will argue, is stevia still, does it have some negative consequences or whatnot? But I would say, look, it's a natural sweetener. I would prefer to be taking that than, say, one of the artificial sweeteners. And again, I'm not saying the artificial sweeteners are necessarily bad for humans in the amounts that are often contained in these products. But long term, who knows? I'd rather go, okay, well, I'm minimizing the risk. So look at the back of the ingredients. If it's got natural cocoa flavoring or chocolate flavoring, vanilla bean extract, then those products are generally going to be pretty safe versus something that has a lot of artificial flavors and additives in it.
Terrific. Here's talking of additives. We're gonna and I love, by the way, the compliment. I think that's a fantastic mindset. Haven't heard that before. I'm going to ask about supplements here. Here's a question: are there any generic supplements, and I think generic around broadly, I think they're asking here, that you think all folk, in parentheses, it's written, all folk should take to help with daily energy or performance, cognitive function? And I think this gentleman's asking any supplements to help us just perform over the course of the day that you think most people would benefit from?
Yeah, I'm always a little nervous of recommending generic supplements. Look, the two that come to mind is creatine monohydrate and good quality fish oil containing high levels of EPA and DHA. I think if you look at the studies around, you talk about daily energy performance and or cognitive function, I would say that's creatine monohydrate to a T. It certainly is probably the most researched, or one of the most researched legal supplements to improve performance. More recently, evidence on cognitive function, certainly lots of evidence around power and strength, improvements in body composition. Now, is it going to directly give you a lot of energy? No. But is it shown to improve exercise performance? Yes. In relation to cognitive decline or cognitive function, there's emerging evidence where it's certainly been used in post-acute traumatic brain injury, so post-concussive syndromes, things like that. Potentially longer-term effects of high-dose supplementation, so going beyond 5 grams a day, getting up into the 10 grams, even 20 grams a day, to help cross over that blood-brain barrier and get the creatine into the brain. So, look, creatine monohydrate would certainly be one, and then the fish oils mentioned. These two supplements, I think, they're just non-negotiables in my mind. They're just things you take every day. You take 5 grams of creatine, between 5 and 10 grams of creatine, depending on potentially body size and what your needs are. And then in terms of your fish oils or your omega-3s, you're taking those on a daily basis. And that's probably going to be somewhere in the realm of 2,000 to 3, maybe 4,000 milligrams of EPA DHA. The reason I say there's a range there is what I would do is get yourself tested. So there's a test called the omega-3 index. You can simply go online, you can search it. There's a company called Omega Quant that does it. Do your test. If it's below 8%, which is, it's sort of done in a marker of between 8 and 12% is seen as optimal. Then if you're below 8%, start supplementing with it. Usually we recommend 3,000 milligrams a day of EPA DHA. Do that for 8 to 12 weeks, retest. Usually it pops up pretty quick. And then after that, it's just a maintenance dose. You're consuming either a high dose or high quality fish oil, or start to lean into eating small oily fish. So things like your pickled herring, your mackerel, your sardines, salmon, things like that.
Fantastic. I got a question. I got a tactical question now from someone who's is a busy executive, and it is the perils of the work dinner here. This is a great one. I think he's asking a little bit more tactical question here. He says, interested in performance, longevity, and of course my sport, but I face the challenge where a part of my role is business dinners and entertaining, and you can paint the picture: big steak houses, lots of good wine. And I often feel pulled into drinking wine. Is there anything that you can provide me as practical advice to manage both the quality of the eating at these restaurants, but also trying to avoid either overconsumption or minimizing the impacts of my consumption? Goodness me, well, you can't stay, you don't have a magic wand, but I'd love to hear you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this.
Yeah, it's such a tricky one, and it's something that a lot of my friends pose the question to me about how do you manage it. And look, avoidance is always easier than resistance, yet probably in this case it's not possible, and you're thrown into the lion's den. So I think, looking ahead, So what I would do is look at the menu ahead of time so that you go in there and you go, I know what I'm ordering. I don't need to look at the menu. You can pretend to look at the menu if you want, but don't be distracted by the menu because you're probably going to see a lot of things on there that you know you shouldn't order, but in the heat of the moment you might. So check your menu beforehand, work out, are you going to have entree, main, or are you going to have main and dessert? You don't have to have a 3-course meal. That's probably, again, the second tip is just either go entree or entree main, main dessert. And I would probably lean towards entree main and then maybe, having, look, if you really had to have something later, maybe a sorbet or something like that, something very small, a single scoop, and do damage limitation. In terms of alcohol, I think it's much more common these days to not drink. And I don't feel the pressure is there so much. It's probably internal pressure as much as anything that you feel you need to drink in order to socialize. So, but in saying that, there's plenty of great non-alcoholic beers available. And again, you could check with the restaurant in advance. Have that poured into a glass so it looks like a beer. So it's you're not walking around with a non-alcoholic beer can. You're just walking around with a beer. No one needs to know if it is that. You could get a glass or a tall glass, fill it with ice, lemonade or a soda water with a squeeze of lime in it and a slice of lime. It looks like a vodka soda or a tequila soda. That could be that. If you are going to drink alcohol, where would I lean? I would lean towards a clean spirit, so something like a vodka soda with fresh lime, although it's extremely boring. You don't tend to have a good time on it. So I'd probably say tequila and lime. Tequila lime topped with fresh soda is a little bit more fun, and you can probably just sip on that very casually throughout the evening. I think intersperse with water in between and fizzy water. I would use fizzy water rather than plain water, and again put a slice of lemon or lime into it. It just tends to make you feel like you're drinking something a little bit more substantial.
Fantastic. Here's a couple more questions, Scott. This is some real gold coming here. Here's one around longevity. The subject du jour here: longevity, quality of life. It says I'm really focused on disease prevention. I've got family history across multiple diseases. I also want to ramp up my quality of life. And so, with that in mind, I hear a lot of your education around helping athletes get faster. Do you have any practical, quick nutrition tips to help me over the longer term build up a platform of health? Obviously, this is a huge subject as a standalone, but any ABCs to help this person?
Yeah, I think, look, there is, it's a huge question, longevity, and obviously a hot topic. I actually wrote an article on a new concept which was around strength span the other day, which we put on our Fuelin website. But the concept of strength span, I think, was a really interesting one. It was talking about like the current focus is so much on, okay, as you get older, you need to be strong. And so there's this focus on the older population now doing weights training. But is that too late? I guess that's the question. Have you sort of maybe missed the boat? Probably haven't missed the boat, but you're probably not going to maximize what was potentially available in those later years if you missed doing strength work in your younger years, especially through your youth and then through middle age. So I think the number one tip for me related to longevity is stay strong. So don't be afraid of lifting weights. And even if you're doing endurance exercise, and I hear this a lot, oh, I don't want to lift weights because A, it's going to interfere with my training or it's going to make me bulky. The reality is it's not. It's probably going to interfere in the short term, like you feel a bit sore, you don't crush all your sessions, but over time, that strength training is going to make you a better athlete. It's going to make you stronger. It's going to make you more powerful. It's going to reduce the risk of injury. So that is first and foremost. And in doing so, you're creating muscle, lean muscle tissue. You're also creating mobility by lifting through range. And all of those things are going to put you in a better place as you get older. So I think it's taking off, not necessarily taking off the endurance hat, but just I do hear from some age groupers, more so than professional athletes, like, oh, I don't want to lift weights because I don't want to do this. And it's like, think about the long term picture here. You're doing endurance training most likely to have enjoyment and to also be healthy. Well, lifting weights and getting stronger is part of that health journey. And so I can't emphasize that enough. And so that, I know it's not a nutrition tip. And the nutrition tip in relation to that is keep your protein high. We know that
Keep your protein. Yeah, I agree.
have if you eat somewhere between 2 and 3 grams per kilo body weight of protein whilst performing athletic endeavors, you are going to be in a better position to either maintain lean muscle mass, gain lean muscle mass, and reduce body fat. That's going to put you in a better position. There are some interesting studies related to health outcomes and higher protein intake as well. So I can get those references for you later, Matty. But I would say high protein intake, lifting weights, they're probably two great tips in terms of just thinking longevity in a broad stroke.
Fantastic. You've arrived. Your last question, Scott. This one is around caffeine. And it's a great one. It's a great one to finish this off. And so, what's your advice around caffeine for daily energy and performance? I love my coffee. I have a couple of cups in the morning, but I also tend to then lean into energy drinks in the afternoon. Help me understand, is this bad for me? Am I doing anything wrong? Is too much caffeine too much?
Short answer, coffee's fine. Energy drinks in the afternoon, not so good. You have to remember that energy drinks are probably a combination of high dose caffeine with a bunch of other additives, including refined sugar or sugar. Now, the sugar's not necessarily the issue here. It's probably more the combination of sugar and high dose caffeine, probably around 200 milligrams that you're consuming late in the day. Remembering that caffeine has a half life of somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. If you have that at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, you've still got 100 milligrams in your system at 9 o'clock at night. Now, that is going to have a huge impact on your sleep, sleep duration, sleep onset, sleep quality. You have a bad night's sleep, what happens the next day? You feel like shit again. So what do? You have a few cups of coffee in the morning, try and boost yourself up. You get to the afternoon, you feel like crap. Tell you what, I'm going to have an energy drink to spike myself, and it just keeps rolling. So you've got to try and break that habit. Rather than having that energy drink in the afternoon, get up, go for a walk, do some push-ups, do some air squats, drink some water, do whatever it is you need to do, but don't drink that energy drink. That pressure, or that sleep pressure, is a build-up of what we call adenosine. So these are the chemicals that float around the brain. Now, when you have caffeine, it blocks adenosine from attaching, and that's what effectively stops you from not feeling sleepy. You can get past that sleep pressure if you just get up, walk around, again, drink some water, do all these things, go and talk to some friends. Leaning into that energy drink is a short-term fix that's going to have probably more negative connotations. So that's where I would just sit with that. Definitely nothing wrong with having a couple of cups of coffee in the morning. Go for it. Just try and stop by 12 o'clock. 1 p.m. at the latest is what I would be recommending.
Exactly aligned. It's perfect. Well, Scott, it's been quite a journey. Thank you very much. Two big episodes there. If you did miss last week's episode, it's a cracker, especially for you guys that are athletically inclined and you're training for races. I think it's a do not miss. And then for everyone, including athletes, today's session, just fantastic. Really appreciate you being here. A lot of fun as always. And we'll try and add some stuff to the show notes with some of the research and the strength span that you talked about. So thanks so much. And we will send all the links with Fuelin. Remember, folks, it is fuelin.com/purple patch if you want to get a hold of Scott and the rest of the team. It's absolutely fantastic as ever. And Scott, well, we're going to do this pretty soon again. So we'll see you in 4 to 6 weeks and we'll take it from there.
Thanks, Matty. Really enjoyable, and hopefully everyone got a lot out of this one.